I'm Steve Clifford. I'm a psychotherapist. Welcome to my therapy room. Today I'd like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about antidepressants. My clients often come to me with questions and concerns, so I thought it'd be a really good opportunity to share with you some thoughts on these. Maybe they're questions that you might have. So I'd start off with perhaps one of the most common ones, which is are antidepressants safe? Well, I suppose the way that I would answer this would be to say if I were depressed or my family were depressed, wouldn't hesitate to take antidepressants. When you're really low, one of the things is that even from a therapy point of view, is that your outlook is so negative that all the talking and all the kind of trying to look at things, it'll be as if it's being done through kind of really dark glasses. That negative will come up all the time. Antidepressants, when they start working, they can just lift the mood and lift the outlook a little, so that you can begin to see that there may be a positive. And it's just that little shift. Taking antidepressants, even for as little as 2 or 3 weeks, can really bring about that kind of little shift we need. The question of safety, question of addiction is another thing. People say, will I become dependent on them? Oh God, aren't they really addictive? Maybe they've heard horror stories of perhaps an elderly relative who was taking medication for years and years and years. Well, I think what we need to think is that going back 30 years, 40 years, there weren't the antidepressants around that we have nowadays. Nowadays we have many sophisticated antidepressants. Back in those days they had something known as benzodiazepines. Now benzodiazepines were a group of medication that I guess the best way to say would be to call them tranquilizers. Now this type of medication wasn't itself very addictive. They're still prescribed nowadays, but prescribed for a set period of time, maybe a week or something like that, and they're monitored very carefully. Whereas back in the day, people took them and they made them feel better, but after a while they would wear off and the person would have to take a higher and higher dose. And then what they would find is that the things they were taking them for actually would appear, they call it things like anxiety, they call it rebound anxiety. So the person would start getting the very thing they were taking the medication for, and when they came off them they had terrible withdrawal symptoms. And that's history. Modern antidepressants are not addictive. Put it another way, they're a different group. They're not benzodiazepines. There are several different types of antidepressant, or fall under several different brackets, but none of them have the same addictive side effects as the old benzodiazepines did. In terms of the addictive fear, well, some people may fear that there's a psychological addiction. What if I become dependent on them? Well, again, a good therapist working with you or your doctor should be able to encourage you to use your own resources and to realise actually the best thing to become dependent on is yourself, and that once you're feeling good and your mood is good, coming off them very slowly will enable you to see that actually you can manage quite well without the medication. I suppose one way to say it would be, why would a doctor prescribe a medication for one problem that's going to create another problem? That's kind of the way that I would answer that one. How long should you take them? Well, that's another question. Well, let's say a typical antidepressant, if you take it for a week or two before it really starts working, in that week or two period, the first things you might notice is maybe your sleep's improving, perhaps you're not so tearful, you're not quite as black and as down as you were when you first started taking them. by about 4 to 6 weeks, you should start to get a little spring back in your step again. You should find that things are beginning to get easier. You know, your memory is not so bad, concentration improves, your mood is lifting, and there's little glimmers of kind of feel-good periods. So 4 to 6 weeks, we're then looking at the mood being really beginning to start to shift in a very positive direction. Now, the question of when do you stop? Well, you don't stop when you're feeling good. I mean, in theory you probably could, there wouldn't be a problem, but there's a lot of evidence now that would suggest that taking the medication for 3 to 6 months after you're feeling well is the best course of action. In that 3 to 6 month period, it really means that if you get any big knocks, it doesn't kind of set you back a little, that you're in a really good position to handle it. And then that brings me on to a question of, what is there a better time to stop than others? Well, I haven't seen this written down anywhere, but my own kind of instinct is that probably the best time to come off antidepressants is the spring. And my rationale for this is that when you think of it in autumn or fall, kind of the days are getting much shorter, the light levels are lower, the serotonin levels, and serotonin is one of the kind of hormones in the brain that is, you know, implicated in depression, that's actually, there's less serotonin in the system, and so that isn't really the time you want to be thinking about stopping. Furthermore, with Christmas, the New Year, that can be quite a stressful time too, so I think there's another good reason to be looking to think, well, maybe just staying on them a little bit longer, wait until the spring, and that will be my optimum time. Why? Well, when you think of it, you know, longer days, the promise of things to come, it's getting brighter, all of those things, you know, it puts a little spring in your step, can kind of give you that little impetus to kind of move forward with your life. And so things are opening up in the spring, whereas in the kind of the depths of winter they're kind of closing down and shutting down. So that would really be my thoughts there. Another thing that people ask me is, well, what should I do if I miss a dose? Well, my response there would be to say that, you know, because they're longer acting and they've got what you call a kind of a half-life, whereas maybe over a week or so they're slowly the dose is getting out of your system. Missing one tablet or one day isn't going to make any difference, because it's still going to be in your system, and we're looking at a longer term thing. We're not just looking at a very short term thing. So don't double up, just take the next dose that comes along. Finally, I'd like to leave you with one last area that again comes up from time to time, and you know, let's face it, this is the real world, and alcohol is freely available, and it's very much a part of people's lives. So the question of, can I take alcohol with antidepressants? Well, I suppose good advice would be, you know, don't drink alcohol with antidepressants. Well, the general advice is to drink it perhaps with caution. So, you know, the occasional glass, make sure, you know, you're not driving, make sure that, you know, you're monitoring how you're feeling. You know, I think you've got to exercise some common sense here. Alcohol is a mind-altering substance, and it can make depression worse. It can increase side effects such as drowsiness, dizziness, coordination. So certainly, you know, with antidepressants, in any case, you've got to be aware that some of them have a kind of a sedative property to them. They'd be the ones that your doctor would say you take at night. These would be ones that you need to be very aware of in terms of you know, driving, operating machinery when you're taking them. Others have a different action, and they're for people whose depression has maybe they're they're very, very lethargic with it, they've got very low energy, then they would probably be prescribed what we call a stimulant antidepressant, which you take in the morning. But again, whichever type of antidepressant, both of them can interact with alcohol, so you've just really got to bear that in mind. There's one type of antidepressant known as an MAOI, or monoamine oxidase inhibitor, to give it its full title, that you really shouldn't touch alcohol whatsoever. There is a chemical in alcohol, in wine, lager, sherry, all types of kind of beer, called tyramine, and that will react very, very badly with antidepressants, and really give you some quite nasty side effects. So exercise, caution, common sense, and I think you can't go far wrong. If you're concerned at all, then certainly just avoid it completely. I think that's probably all I want to say about antidepressants for the time being. So thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you.